IGAD did the gender assessment of the land sector, and which we all been talking about. We found out that there are high level of gender inequalities on land, and women tend to be more marginalized when it comes to land. Not only talking about control, access is an issue. When you talk about inheritance issues, it's a very serious challenge across the IGAD region. So it is something that we must address, and we have already started addressing this, and these are the good news that I'm bringing this afternoon. So what have we done to close the gender gap? The journey has just started. As IGAD, as I mentioned, we conducted the gender assessment of the land sector across the 7 IGAD member states, which revealed very major and cross-cutting issues across all the member states. One, that the policy and legal environment on gender equality and land is really lacking. In some countries, they have laws and policies which are gender responsive, but the practice on ground is different. Nothing much seems to be shifting. The second inequality and issue that was brought out is that patriarchal systems, discriminatory cultural practices have so much hindered the accessibility, utilization, and control as ownership of land by women. Land is vested in the hands of men, and where women access, they do it through relationship with their male relatives, either as husbands, brothers, fathers, or uncles, or where the clan says, we can allow you to do this work in cases where women have lost their husbands. That is a very critical challenge. There are also instances of multiple legal systems, where you have the Constitution having good gender provisions, you have good land laws, but also we have customary laws which are recognized by these constitutions. And customary laws in all the IGAD member states have been seen to have very discriminatory provisions. So applying both the statutory law and the discriminatory to address women's land rights issues is quite challenging. And the other issue that has come out is that land administration and governance structures are quite male-dominated. You rarely see women in decision-making places, from grassroots level, from local institutions to national institutions, the ministries in this case. And that means that there is also limited representation and participation of women in land decision-making processes, and that's a very serious challenge. That is something that we need to understand as stakeholders, as public sector actors, as civil society organizations, and the academia, the representatives that are in this room. So after we found out that as IGAD, we did not stop there to start lamenting that these are the existing challenges. We went on to do consultations with the different member states. And like, what do we do about these problems? They are cutting across all the 7 member states. What do? We held multi-stakeholder workshops across the 7 member states, and some of the participants of those multi-stakeholder workshops are in this room. And from the multi-stakeholder workshops, we were able to come up with what we call the Women's Land Rights Agenda. So that's the good news that I'm bringing here, that all the IGAD member states, as we speak, have what we call the Women's Land Rights Agenda, endorsed by the ministries. So that the agenda at country level provides framework for women's land rights programming. And we did not end there. As IGAD, we took it upon ourselves to consolidate, to pick the common threads and cross-cutting issues from the country women's land rights agenda to come up with what we call the IGAD Regional Women's Land Rights Agenda. So the IGAD Regional Women's Land Rights Agenda has been endorsed by the ministers, the IGAD ministers responsible for lands and ministers responsible for gender, in a communique that was signed on the 28th of July, 2021 in Nairobi. The IGAD Regional Women's Land Rights Agenda, which is a 10-year agenda, 2021 to 2030, has been endorsed by the ministers responsible for gender and ministers responsible for lands from across the IGAD member states. So that agenda provides a framework for programming. And for IGAD, when we started discussing, every presentation, there was a challenge of land access. So meaning that we have a framework that guides our programming, even within the IGAD resilience building programs. And we need to take advantage of that. So I just want to quickly mention to you what the key focus areas of the agenda are, because it's a very transformative agenda. And the first area in the agenda is aimed at improving the policy and legal framework for gender equality on land in the IGAD member states. The second area, which touches the critical discussion that we've had since we started, is about addressing culture, religion, and customary practices that hinder women's realization of their full potential on land. Across the IGAD member states, cultural norms, cultural practices that are discriminatory are the ones that are failing most of the things that we do. And it's not to do with the grassroots communities, the mindsets, the perceptions, the beliefs also sit with these same people that I sit with, that we call elites, that we call leaders, that we call directors. So we need to challenge all those at different levels. The third area is about reshaping urbanization towards inclusive, resilient, and sustainable cities in the IGAD region. Because as you see, and as you know, the IGAD region is urbanizing. So if we really need to address the concerns of the different groups to make our cities more inclusive, we must take deliberate action. The fourth area is about strengthening inclusion in large-scale land-based investments. And what we've seen across the IGAD member states, that these investments and the decisions about what investments and issues of displacement are made by high-level stakeholders and rarely do involve women and other marginalized groups. So we need to make sure that the different groups that are marginalized really get to benefit from the large-scale land-based investments. The fifth area is about enhancing capacity and coordination of land institutions and actors on gender mainstreaming, because most times we tend to assume that they know it, when actually they do not know, as you could have picked from the discussion since we came. Everyone is talking about gender mainstreaming. When it comes to presenting, the story is different. So we committed, and the ministers also agreed that we need to build the capacity of actors on gender mainstreaming. The sixth area is about enhancing public awareness and information on women's land rights. Most people, not only the women themselves, but even the men, and also sometimes the so-called decision makers, do not understand the provisions in these different regional, international, and even the national policies and laws in place. So there must be deliberate action to increase awareness across the different spectrum. The seventh area is about building women's leadership and participation in land governance. Like I said before, that land governance and administration is quite male-dominated, so we must take deliberate steps to build the capacity of the women and women representatives in land governance. The eighth area is about youth participation, because we very well know 10 years from now, most of us would have retired. So if the youth do not understand and appreciate the importance of land and how best to make use of it, how best it can build their livelihoods in a more resilient manner, then we won't have achieved much. So we really need to support and engage youth and ensure that they also participate in land governance. They will be the future leaders. The ninth area, which touches mostly the IGAD component, is strengthening women's rights in communal and community land. And as we say that in most of the ASALs, women representation is quite limited, different challenges from other land systems. So that's also a deliberate action that we need to strengthen that area. And the 10th area, as I said, the agenda has 10 areas, is generating sex and gender desegregated data on land. This is very important. Although it's the 10th, I think it's the most important thing, because we need that information to inform our policies and programs. So that's what the agenda provides for. So I'm calling upon everyone in this room. This agenda is available on the IGAD website. You just put the IGAD Region Women's Land Rights Agenda, you straight get it. Make sure you make use of that in designing your programs. It provides strategies for each of these areas. What is it that you can do? Then you can contextualize based on what you think works for you. So I really urge you to make use of this document. It's a very useful framework for our programming, but also for advocacy. Then lastly, but not least, I want to talk about some of the initiatives that we have put in place. We have advocacy resources, gender and land resources, that will be useful for the different actors in this room. If we are working on resilient livelihoods, on building resilience, then you must be an interested stakeholder. We have developed what we call the Gender Handbook for Land Administrators. So this is a tool, that a resource that will be used by land actors to see how best they can support and work on issues of women at different levels, at local level, but also at national level. We've also developed the Gender and Land TOT, Training of Trainers Manual, which also has different components, including a section on social norms. So it's important that we make use of these resources. Then we've also developed the Gender Sensitive and Conflict Sensitive Alternative Dispute Resolution Handbook. So that's also already available, and we can share with you. We've also established the Women and Land Community of Practice, which brings together different stakeholders, public sector, the gender specialists, the land actors, the academia, from civil society organizations, also from research institutions. So we meet regularly, and members of the Gender and Resilience Working Group are also part of the Women and Land Community of Practice. So if you're interested, please let me know so we can add you to that community of practice. So basically that's it, and we can have an extensive discussion if you're interested in learning more about our work and learning more about women and land issues. I'll still be with you here tomorrow, and thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to working with you, because we work in a very multi-stakeholder way, so we need the different actors to be able to cause the change, to transform the norms, to deconstruct the norms and beliefs that have really kept women behind. Thank you.